Rain hammered the metal roof of Outpost Verin like 1,000 tiny fists, and Daniel Reyes was elbow-deep in a busted fuel line when the lights flickered for the third time that night. He cursed under his breath and wiped grease off his hands with an old rag. The storm outside had been building for hours, and the wind was now strong enough to rattle the loose panels on the workshop's outer wall. Daniel had learned long ago that storms on this rock never came alone. They always brought trouble with them. He was 34 years old, tall, with rough hands and tired eyes that had seen too many double shifts. Back on Earth, he used to fix cars for a living. Now he fixed starship engines for aliens who barely looked at him twice. Humans were not liked much out here. To the Kaloth coalition that ran this mining outpost, humans were just cheap labor, good with tools, but not worth much respect. Daniel had gotten used to being ignored. It was easier that way. He was about to shut down the workshop for the night when he heard it. A sound cut through the storm, sharp and painful, like something screaming in agony. Daniel froze, wrench still in his hand. The sound came again, closer this time, carried on the wind. It did not sound like any engine or machine he knew. It sounded alive. Curiosity got the better of him. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped out into the rain, boots sinking into the mud. The wind nearly knocked him off balance, and rain soaked through his jacket in seconds. He followed the sound past the fuel tanks, past the old scrap pile, until his light landed on something lying in the mud near the perimeter fence. At first, Daniel thought it was some kind of drone that had crashed, but then it moved, and he realized it was breathing. He crept closer, heart pounding, and his flashlight beam revealed a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It was small, maybe the size of a large dog, covered in dark green scales that shimmered even in the dim light. It had a long tail, sharp claws, and 2 wings, one of which was bent at a terrible angle, clearly broken. Blood mixed with rainwater around it. The creature let out another cry, weaker this time, and turned its head toward him. Its eyes were golden, slit like a cat's, and full of fear. Daniel had never believed in dragons, not even as a kid, but staring at this creature, he could not think of another word for it. It looked like something out of an old storybook, except it was real, and it was dying in front of him. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see 2 Kaloth overseers approaching, their tall, thin bodies wrapped in rain cloaks, faces unreadable under their hoods. One of them spoke in a flat, cold voice through a translator device strapped to its chest. "Step away from the creature, human. It is wild fauna. Outpost protocol forbids interference with local wildlife." Daniel looked down at the trembling animal, then back at the overseer. "It's hurt. It's going to die if nobody helps it." "That is the natural order," the overseer said. "Return to your quarters. This is not your concern." Something about the way the creature looked at him, scared and alone in the storm, made Daniel's chest tighten. He had spent years on this outpost, keeping his head down, doing his job, not making trouble. But this felt different. This felt wrong to just walk away from. "With respect," Daniel said, straightening up, "I'm not leaving it here to die." The overseers exchanged a look he could not read. "This is a violation of contract terms," one of them warned. "Then dock my pay," Daniel said, and before they could stop him, he bent down and carefully scooped the creature into his arms. It weighed more than he expected, but it did not fight him. It simply trembled, its golden eyes locked on his face, as if trying to decide whether he was a threat or not. The overseers did not follow as he carried the creature back toward his workshop. Maybe they thought it would die anyway. Maybe they simply did not care enough to stop him. Either way, Daniel did not look back. Inside, he laid the creature down gently on a folded tarp near his workbench, the warmest spot in the room. Under the bright work lights, he got his first real look at it. The scales were not just green, they had faint patterns running through them, almost like circuit lines, glinting silver when the light hit them just right. That was strange. Animals did not have markings like that, not natural ones anyway. The creature watched him with those golden eyes, breathing hard, wings twitching in pain. Daniel had fixed broken landing struts, cracked hulls, and burnt out engines more times than he could count. He had never fixed anything alive before, but looking at the broken wing bent the wrong way, he realized the basic idea was not so different. Bones were just a different kind of frame. Muscle was wiring. Blood was fuel. He grabbed his first aid kit, then his toolbox for good measure, and knelt down beside the trembling creature. "All right," he said quietly, more to himself than to the animal. "Let's see what we're working with." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the workshop, Daniel Reyes had already made up his mind. Whatever this creature was, wherever it came from, he was not going to let it die in the mud like some piece of broken equipment nobody wanted to save. He did not know yet that this one decision, made in the middle of a storm, would change everything. Grease-stained tools were never meant to patch up living flesh, but Daniel Reyes had never been one to wait for the perfect equipment before starting a job. He knelt beside the injured creature, studying the wing bent at a wrong angle, and tried to think like a mechanic instead of a scared man staring at something impossible. The wound was worse than he first thought. The bone had snapped clean through, and the thin membrane of the wing was torn along one edge, leaking blood steadily onto the tarp. If this had been a machine, Daniel would already be reaching for a replacement part. But this was not a machine, and there was no replacement for a living wing. He talked to the creature the whole time, keeping his voice low and steady, the same way he used to talk to nervous customers back on Earth who thought their car was about to explode. "Easy now, I'm not gonna hurt you. Just gotta stop the bleeding first, all right." The creature's golden eyes tracked his every move, its breathing quick and shallow. When Daniel reached for the wing, it let out a low warning growl, small claws flexing against the tarp. He paused, hands raised. "I know it hurts," he said softly. "I know, but I can't fix it if you don't let me touch it." He was not sure if it understood him, but after a moment, the growling stopped. The creature's body sagged, exhausted, and it allowed him to gently lift the injured wing. Daniel worked as carefully as he could, cleaning the wound with antiseptic from his first aid kit, wrapping the torn membrane with sterile gauze soaked in a mild numbing solution meant for human cuts. He had no idea if it would even work on alien biology, but it was the only thing he had. The real problem was the broken bone. It needed to be set properly, or it would heal crooked and useless. Daniel glanced around his workshop, eyes landing on a strip of lightweight titanium alloy he used for patching small hull cracks. It was thin, strong, and flexible enough to bend into shape, exactly what he needed for a splint. He cut a piece to size, padded it with cloth so it would not dig into the scales, and carefully aligned the broken bone as best he could remember from an old first aid course he took years ago. The creature screeched in pain when the bone shifted into place, thrashing once before Daniel held it steady with a firm but gentle grip. I know, almost done," he said, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold night air. "Just gotta wrap it now." He secured the splint with medical tape, wrapping it snug but not too tight, leaving room for the wing to breathe. When he finally stepped back, the creature lay still, chest rising and falling in exhausted breaths, but the bleeding had slowed to almost nothing. Daniel sat back on his heels and wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist. There, that should hold. For the next few days, Daniel kept the creature hidden in a back corner of his workshop, behind a stack of old crates where the Kaloth overseers rarely bothered to check. He fed it ration bars soaked in water, since it seemed too weak to eat anything solid at first. He kept a heating panel running nearby, since the creature seemed to shiver constantly, and made sure to change its bandages twice a day, just like he would with any wound that needed watching. At first, the creature only tolerated him. It flinched whenever he got too close, watching him with wary eyes, muscles tensed, as if ready to bolt or bite. But slowly, day by day, something began to shift. It stopped flinching when he changed the bandages. It started leaning into his hand when he touched the good side of its head. By the third day, it let out a strange, low sound when he entered the workshop each morning, almost like a greeting. Daniel found himself talking to it more than he probably should have, telling it about his day, complaining about the Kaloth overseers, even telling old stories about Earth that nobody out here ever wanted to hear. The creature listened, or at least seemed to, tilting its head at the sound of his voice. He noticed something else too. The strange silver markings on its scales, the ones that looked almost like circuit lines, seemed to glow faintly whenever the creature was calm and resting. At first he thought it was just a trick of the light, but on the fourth night, sitting alone in the dim workshop, he watched the lines pulse gently in rhythm with the creature's slow, steady breathing. It was beautiful and strange, and Daniel had no idea what it meant. By the end of the first week, the wing was healing faster than Daniel expected, far faster than any injury he had ever seen, human or otherwise. The swelling had gone down, the torn membrane was knitting itself back together, and the bone beneath the splint felt solid when he carefully checked it. He was no doctor, but even he could tell something unusual was happening. One evening, as he sat beside the creature changing its bandage for the night, it lifted its head and rested it gently against his arm. It was such a small thing, but it hit Daniel harder than he expected. Nobody on this outpost had ever looked at him like that before, not with trust, not with something close to affection. "All right, buddy," Daniel said quietly, scratching gently behind one small horn. "Looks like you're stuck with me for a while." He had no idea that somewhere far above the storm clouds, sensors were already picking up faint energy readings coming from his little workshop, readings that would soon bring far more attention to Outpost Varen than Daniel Reyes was ready for. The door to Daniel's workshop slammed open without warning, and he barely had time to step in front of the crates before three figures marched inside, rain still dripping off their cloaks. At the front was Administrator Voss, the Kaloth official who ran Outpost Varen, her thin face set in a look of cold irritation that Daniel had learned to recognize as trouble. "Mr. Reyes," she said, her translator device giving her voice a flat, mechanical edge. "We have received unusual sensor readings originating from this building for the past several days. Explain yourself." Daniel's mind raced. He had been careful, or so he thought, keeping the creature hidden, keeping the heating panel low, changing bandages when no one was around, but apparently not careful enough. He glanced toward the crates where the young dragon lay resting, its wing much stronger now, the silver markings along its scales glowing faintly in the dim light. "I don't know what you're talking about," Daniel said, trying to sound calm. Voss was not convinced. She stepped past him, her two guards following close behind, and moved toward the crates. Daniel's heart pounded as he considered blocking her path, but before he could decide, one of the guards raised a small scanning device and swept it across the hidden corner. The device beeped sharply, and Voss's expression shifted from irritation to something closer to alarm. "Move the crates," she ordered. Daniel stepped forward. "Wait, just wait a second. It's hurt, it's healing. I didn't do anything wrong." "Move them," Voss repeated, ignoring him completely. The guards shoved the crates aside, revealing the creature curled up on its top. The moment the scanner passed over it directly, the device let out a rapid series of beeps, and Voss actually took a step back, her cold expression cracking into something Daniel had never seen on her face before. Shock. "That is not possible," she muttered, mostly to herself. She turned to her guard. "Confirm the reading, now." The guard ran the scanner again, then held up a small display showing a stream of alien text and a glowing red symbol Daniel did not recognize. Voss stared at it for a long moment before looking back at the creature, then at Daniel, as if seeing him for the first time. "Do you understand what you have been hiding, Mr. Reyes?" she asked, her voice quieter now, almost cautious. "It's a dragon," Daniel said simply, "or something like one. It was hurt, I fixed its wing, that's all." "This," Voss said slowly, "is a Dracoth hatchling, a species believed extinct for over 3 centuries. Do you understand what that means?" Daniel did not really, but the way she said it made his stomach twist with worry. "It means it's rare," he said carefully. "It doesn't mean you get to take it away." "It means," Voss said, straightening up, regaining her composure, "that this creature is no longer a matter for a simple outpost administrator to decide. This will be reported immediately. Specialists will be sent to retrieve it for proper study and containment." "Containment," Daniel repeated, his jaw tightening. "You mean a cage?" "I mean a controlled environment where it can be properly examined," Voss said, though even she did not sound entirely convinced by her own words. Daniel looked down at the creature, who had lifted its head and was watching the exchange with wide, alert eyes, ears flat against its skull, clearly sensing the tension in the room. He thought about the past week, the nights spent changing bandages, the way it had leaned its head against his arm just days ago, trusting him completely. "No," Daniel said firmly. Voss blinked. "Excuse me." "I said no, you're not taking it. It's still healing. Moving it now, poking and scanning it with whatever equipment your specialists bring that could kill it. I'm not letting that happen." "This is not your decision to make, human," Voss snapped, some of her earlier coldness returning. "Guards, secure the creature for transport." The two guards stepped forward, reaching for restraint devices on their belts. Daniel moved without thinking, placing himself directly between them and the crates, arms spread wide. "Don't." "Step aside, Mr. Reyes," Voss warned. "This will not end well for you if you resist." Daniel's heart hammered in his chest, but he did not move. He had spent years on this outpost keeping quiet, avoiding trouble, letting things go that he probably should have spoken up about. But not this time. "I'm not moving," he said, voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. The guards exchanged a glance with Voss, who gave a sharp nod. They stepped closer, restraint devices raised, and Daniel braced himself, unsure what exactly he thought he could do against two armed Kaloth guards. That was when the creature moved. With surprising speed for something that had been near death just a week ago, the young dragon scrambled up from its top and pushed itself in front of Daniel, spreading its good wing wide like a shield, while the injured one still hung in its splint. It let out a piercing screech, sharp enough to make the guards flinch and cover their ears, golden eyes blazing with something fierce and protective. Everyone in the room froze. Voss stared at the creature in stunned silence, her earlier scanner display still glowing faintly in her hand. "That is a wing shield stance," she said slowly, almost to herself, disbelief creeping into her voice. "That is not simple animal instinct. That is a bonding behavior." Daniel looked down at the creature, standing protectively in front of him, wings spread, small body trembling, but refusing to back down. Something warm and strange settled in his chest, something he did not have a name for yet. "Lower your weapons," Voss said quietly to her guards, holding up a hand. They hesitated, then obeyed. She stared at Daniel and the creature for a long moment, her expression unreadable, before speaking again, her voice carrying a weight it had not held before. "This changes everything," she said. "I need to contact the regional council immediately." Daniel did not know it yet, but the events of that single night, a creature choosing to shield him instead of fleeing, were about to pull him into something far bigger than a broken wing and a quiet workshop on the edge of nowhere. 3 days after the confrontation in his workshop, Daniel found himself sitting across a polished table from people he never expected to meet, in a room far nicer than anything Outpost Verin usually offered. Word had spread fast, faster than he thought possible for a mining colony this far from anywhere important, and now he was surrounded by scientists, historians, and officials from half a dozen different worlds, all of them staring at him like he had grown a second head. The young dragon sat beside his chair, curled protectively around his legs, wings still wrapped but noticeably stronger. It had refused to be separated from him even for a moment since the incident with the guards, and after watching what happened when they tried, nobody was eager to test that again. At the head of the table sat an elderly Kaloth scholar named Director Harvek, whose long fingers kept tapping against a data pad as he studied Daniel with sharp, curious eyes. "Mr. Reyes," he began, "do you understand the significance of what has happened here?" "Not really," Daniel admitted. "I just fixed a broken wing." A few of the officials exchanged glances, some amused, some clearly skeptical that a simple human mechanic could be at the center of something this important. Harvek ignored them and continued. "The Dracoth species vanished from recorded history over 3 centuries ago," he said. "Most scholars believed they were hunted to extinction during the old wars, or perhaps fled to unknown space. Their sudden reappearance, a living hatchling, is remarkable on its own, but what happened between you and this creature is something else entirely." He gestured to a holographic display that flickered to life above the table, showing old texts and faded images of dragon-like creatures depicted alongside small, unfamiliar figures in ancient artwork. "Dracoth hatchlings do not simply imprint on any caretaker. Historical records, fragmented as they are, describe a bonding ritual that occurs only under very specific conditions. The hatchling must be healed through patience and sacrifice by someone expecting nothing in return. This has not been documented in over 300 years. Daniel glanced down at the creature curled against his leg, who chose that exact moment to nudge his hand with its snout, clearly wanting attention, despite the serious conversation happening above its head. He scratched behind its ear without thinking, and a few officials at the table actually leaned forward to watch, fascinated. "There's something else," Harvek continued, pulling up another image, older and more damaged than the last. It showed a carved stone tablet, worn with age, depicting dragon-like creatures flying alongside small, upright figures. These carvings were recovered from ruins on a world far from here, believed to be tens of thousands of years old. The species depicted alongside the Dracoth in these ancient records has never been identified. Small, clawless, warm-blooded, bipedal. The room went quiet. Daniel felt every eye turn toward him. "You're saying that's supposed to be us," Daniel said slowly. "Humans." "We are saying it is possible," Harvek corrected carefully. "Records from that era are incomplete, and Earth was not officially contacted by Galactic Society until relatively recently. And yet, these carvings predate that contact by thousands of years." Daniel sat back in his chair, mind spinning. He had come from a small town, fixed cars for a living, taken a labor contract out here because the pay was decent and he needed a change. He had never once considered that his species might have some forgotten history among the stars, long before anyone from Earth ever left the solar system. One of the other officials, a sharp-featured woman from a coalition trade authority, cleared her throat impatiently. "Regardless of ancient history, the fact remains that a live Dracoth specimen is currently bonded to a human laborer. This creature holds immense scientific and cultural value. I propose immediate transfer to a proper research facility where it can be studied under controlled conditions." The moment the word transfer left her mouth, the dragon at Daniel's feet let out a low, rumbling growl, scales bristling, the silver markings along its body flaring bright. "I would advise against that," Harvek said quickly, holding up a hand toward the woman. "As I mentioned, the bond formed here is not merely emotional. Early scans suggest a biological link is forming as well, something closer to a symbiotic connection. Attempting to forcibly separate a bonded Dracoth from its chosen partner has historically resulted in extreme aggression, sometimes fatal to those involved." The woman's face paled slightly, though she tried to hide it. "Then what do you propose?" Harvek turned to look directly at Daniel. "I propose we ask the one being who actually understands this bond." All eyes turned to Daniel again. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unused to this much attention, but the dragon beside him had calmed slightly at the sound of his voice, leaning its head against his knee, watching him with those golden eyes full of quiet trust. "He stays with me," Daniel said firmly. "Wherever I go, whatever happens next, he stays with me. That's not up for discussion." Murmurs broke out around the table, some annoyed, some intrigued. Harvek held up a hand for silence, then nodded slowly. "Given the unprecedented nature of this bond and the clear risk of forced separation, I recommend the Council recognize Mr. Reyes as the hatchling's official guardian under galactic conservation law. This would grant him certain protections and responsibilities previously never extended to a human." The trade authority official looked ready to argue, but a quick glance around the table told her she was outnumbered. After a long, tense moment, she gave a stiff nod of agreement. Daniel let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. Beside him, the dragon lifted its head and let out a soft, satisfied chirp, as if it somehow understood exactly what had just been decided. "There is one more matter," Harvek said, his tone shifting, more serious now. "News of this bonding has already spread beyond this council chamber. Not everyone will be pleased by this outcome, Mr. Reyes. Some factions may see a human holding this kind of significance as inconvenient." Daniel looked down at the young dragon resting against his leg, its wing nearly healed, its markings glowing steady and calm now that the tension in the room had eased. He had no idea what kind of trouble that warning meant, but for the first time since the storm that brought them together, he felt something he had not expected to feel out here on the edge of nowhere. He felt like he actually mattered. 2 weeks passed, and Outpost Verin had changed more than Daniel ever thought possible. Where people once ignored him in the mess hall, now they whispered when he walked by. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with open suspicion, as if a mechanic bonded to a legendary creature was somehow a threat to the natural order of things. Daniel tried to ignore it and go back to his normal life, but normal was no longer an option. The young dragon, whom Daniel had started calling Riggs after an old dog he had growing up, was almost fully grown now, far bigger than the small trembling creature he had found in the mud. Its wing had healed perfectly, stronger even than before the injury, and it followed Daniel everywhere it could, curling up outside his workshop door at night like an oversized, scaled guard dog. Daniel was tightening a bolt on a cargo loader late one evening when he first noticed something was wrong. The workshop lights flickered, then died completely, plunging the room into darkness. He frowned, setting down his wrench. Power outages happened sometimes, but never this suddenly, never without warning from the outpost systems. Riggs, who had been dozing near the door, lifted his head sharply, ears pricking forward, a low growl building in his throat. Daniel had learned by now to trust that instinct completely. "What is it, buddy?" he whispered. The answer came in the form of the workshop's outer door hissing open, not with the usual mechanical groan, but smoothly, quietly, like someone had deliberately overridden the lock. Two figures slipped inside, dressed in dark tactical gear, faces hidden behind breathing masks. Daniel's blood went cold. He did not wait to ask questions. He grabbed the nearest tool, a heavy metal pipe wrench, and backed toward the workbench, putting it between himself and the intruders. Riggs was already moving, placing his large body between Daniel and the strangers, wings spreading wide, teeth bared in a silent snarl. One of the intruders raised a weapon, some kind of sedative rifle designed to drop a target quickly and quietly. Before they could fire, Riggs lunged, faster than something his size had any right to move, slamming into the intruder and sending them crashing into a stack of crates. "Daniel Reyes," the second intruder said through a distorted voice modulator, weapon raised and aimed steadily at him. "You have become a significant problem for certain interested parties. This does not need to be difficult." Daniel's hands tightened around the wrench. "Yeah, well, I've never been good at making things easy." The intruder fired. Daniel dove sideways, feeling the dart whistle past his ear and embed itself in a metal cabinet behind him with a hiss of released gas. Riggs let out a furious roar and charged the second attacker, forcing them to abandon their aim and scramble backward toward the door. The first intruder, recovering from being knocked into the crates, pulled a small device from their belt and slammed it against the wall, and Daniel realized with a jolt of panic that it was some kind of explosive charge. "Riggs, move!" Daniel shouted. The device beeped once, then detonated, blowing a ragged hole in the workshop wall and filling the room with smoke and debris. Daniel was thrown backward, ears ringing, vision blurred. Through the chaos, he saw Riggs shielding him with his own body, scales absorbing most of the flying debris that would have otherwise torn into Daniel. The two intruders used the confusion to flee through the new opening in the wall, disappearing into the darkness outside. Daniel coughed, pushing himself up on shaking arms, checking himself for injuries. Bruised, definitely, but alive. He looked over at Riggs, who was already back on his feet, growling toward the hole in the wall where the attackers had vanished. "You saved my life," Daniel said quietly, still catching his breath. "Again." Riggs turned and pressed his snout gently against Daniel's shoulder, a gesture that had become their own quiet way of checking in on each other. Word of the attack spread through the outpost within hours, and by morning, Director Harvick himself had arrived on an emergency transport, his usually calm expression tight with concern. "This confirms our worst fears," he said, packing the damaged workshop while engineers worked to repair the blown wall. "There are factions who see your bond with Riggs as a threat to established power structures. Some believe humanity gaining recognition through this event sets a dangerous precedent." "So what, I'm supposed to just live in fear now?" Daniel asked, frustration creeping into his voice. No, Harvek said firmly. You are supposed to let this be known publicly. Attempted assassination of a recognized Dracoth Guardian is a serious crime under galactic law, one that cannot be quietly buried. This attack, as terrifying as it was, may actually protect you going forward. No faction wants to be publicly associated with an attack this clumsy. News of the assassination attempt spread fast across neighboring systems, faster than anyone expected. What started as a strange story about a human mechanic and a legendary creature suddenly became a much bigger conversation about old prejudices, about a species long dismissed as primitive laborers, and about whether the galaxy had been wrong about humanity all along. Daniel found himself receiving messages from places he had never even heard of, some curious, some supportive, a few even hostile, but all of it proof that something had fundamentally shifted. Humanity was no longer being ignored. Standing beside Riggs a few nights later, watching repair crews finish patching the workshop wall, Daniel let out a long breath. This is getting bigger than I ever wanted, buddy, he admitted quietly. Riggs let out a low rumble, nudging his shoulder affectionately, as if to say that whatever came next, they would face it together. Daniel found that thought oddly comforting, given everything that had happened. He had come to this outpost just looking for steady work and a quiet life. Instead, he had found something far more important, and there was no going back now. A month after the attack on his workshop, Daniel stood on a landing platform he never imagined he would ever set foot on, watching a formal delegation ship descend through the clouds above Outpost Verin. Riggs stood beside him, fully grown now, wings folded neatly against his back, silver markings glowing faintly with something like pride. Daniel still could not quite believe how much had changed in such a short time. The ship touched down smoothly, and Director Harvek stepped out first, followed by several officials Daniel did not recognize, all wearing formal robes marking them as representatives of the wider Galactic Council. Harvek approached with a rare smile on his usually stern face. "Mr. Reyes," he said warmly, "the Council has reached a decision regarding your situation and regarding Riggs." Daniel straightened up, unsure what to expect. Ever since the assassination attempt, things had moved fast: hearings, investigations, public statements, more attention than he had ever wanted in his entire life. "All right," he said carefully, "let's hear it." "The Council has officially established a new position," Harvek explained. "A liaison role between humanity and the Dracoth conservation effort, someone to help study and protect the species properly without repeating past mistakes made through fear and ignorance. Someone who already has the trust of a bonded Dracoth." He paused meaningfully. "We would like that person to be you." Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "Me, I'm just a mechanic." "You are the only being in 3 centuries to successfully bond with a Dracoth hatchling," Harvek said. "You saved his life, protected him against powerful interests, and survived an assassination attempt without abandoning him. I would say you are far more qualified than you give yourself credit for." Riggs let out a soft rumble beside him, nudging his shoulder gently, as if urging him to accept. Daniel found himself smiling despite the nerves twisting in his stomach. "What would the job actually involve?" he asked. "Travel mostly," Harvek said. "There is reason to believe the Dracoth are not entirely extinct. Riggs may not be the last of his kind. There are old ruins, forgotten star charts, remote worlds never properly explored, that may hold answers about where the rest of his species went, and perhaps answers about humanity's own forgotten history among the stars as well." Daniel glanced at the carved tablet image still saved on his data pad, the one showing dragon-like creatures flying alongside small, upright figures thousands of years ago. He thought about his quiet life fixing cars back on Earth, and how far away that life felt now. "There's more," Harvek added, his tone growing more serious. "Since the news of your bond spread, several other galactic factions have expressed sudden interest in establishing formal relations with humanity. Trade proposals, diplomatic inquiries, even requests for cultural exchange programs. It seems your actions here have changed how the galaxy views your entire species, Mr. Reyes. Not bad for a man who only wanted to fix a broken wing. Daniel let out a short laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. I really was just trying to fix a wing. Sometimes, Havek said with a small smile, the smallest acts of kindness carry the largest consequences. Will you accept the position? Daniel looked down at Riggs, who met his gaze steadily, golden eyes calm and trusting, exactly as they had been that very first night in the storm. He thought about everything that had happened since then, the fear, the danger, but also the strange, unexpected sense of purpose he had found along the way. He was not the same overlooked mechanic who had dragged a dying creature out of the mud all those weeks ago. Yeah, Daniel said finally, a small smile tugging at his lips. I'll take it. Havek nodded, clearly pleased, and stepped back to allow the formal paperwork process to begin, though Daniel barely paid attention to the details, his mind already drifting toward what came next. New worlds, new mysteries, a chance to uncover secrets about his own species that nobody back on Earth had ever known existed. That evening, after the delegation ship departed and the outpost settled back into its usual quiet hum, Daniel walked out to the edge of the landing platform, Riggs following close behind. The sun was setting over Outpost Verin, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple, the storm clouds from that very first night long gone. Riggs nudged him gently, then spread his powerful wings wide, clearly asking a silent question. Daniel grinned, climbing carefully onto his back, gripping the sturdy harness that engineers had built specifically for this purpose weeks earlier. All right, buddy, Daniel said, patting his neck. Let's see what you've got. With one powerful beat of his wings, Riggs launched them both into the evening sky, soaring high above the outpost that had once dismissed Daniel as just another replaceable human laborer. Below them, workers paused their tasks to watch, some still in awe, some finally starting to understand what Daniel had known from that very first storm-soaked night. This creature and this man was something the galaxy had never truly seen before. As they flew higher, the wind rushing past him, Daniel could not help but laugh, a genuine, free laugh he had not felt in years. He was no longer just a mechanic fixing broken machines in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. He was the first human bonded to a Dracoth in 3 centuries, standing at the edge of an old mystery that stretched back thousands of years before his own species even reached the stars. Whatever waited for them out there, ancient ruins, lost history, other galactic powers now watching humanity with newfound curiosity, Daniel knew he would not be facing it alone. Riggs let out a triumphant roar into the darkening sky, and Daniel held on tight, grinning as the lights of Outpost Verin shrank below them. Their story, he realized, was really just beginning.